Have you ever, looked at a new AI tool, watched it just instantly complete a task you spent the last 5 years mastering, and thought, what exactly am I here for?
Oh, yeah. It's a very specific kind of dread, isn't
It
it?
really is. You're just sitting there, the cursor is blinking, and you feel the ground shifting right under your career. If you felt that, you are definitely not alone.
Right, because it's pretty much the defining question of the workplace right now. I mean, across almost every industry,
Yeah.
we are all trying to figure out where we fit when the machine suddenly gets, incredibly good at the actual execution of our daily work.
Yeah, the friction isn't just about learning new software anymore. I mean, it's about redefining our whole professional identity.
Exactly. It's not just a tool upgrade. It's a completely new paradigm.
Right. So the grounding source for our deep dive today tackles this exact friction. It's a narrative piece by Aaron Rose, and it's called The Secret Life of Claude Code.
And what I love about this text is how it frames this massive technological shift. It places us somewhere, well, completely unexpected.
Yeah, we are definitely not dropped into some sleek, neon-lit Silicon Valley boardroom.
No, not at all. We're in a grand Victorian library in London.
Imagine these tall bookshelves stretching all the way up to the ceiling, the smell of old paper, and there's this fire burning in the grate to fight off the autumn chill.
It's just such a great setting because it's an environment where deep, deliberate craftsmanship is like the only thing that matters. Code quality is treated with this almost ancient reverence.
Yeah. And in this library, we meet two software engineers. There's Margaret, who's a seasoned senior developer, and Timothy, her junior colleague.
Setting the story in that specific room immediately creates this powerful tension. Totally contrasts the hyper-modern reality of AI, these tools that work in milliseconds, with the slow, accumulated weight of deep expertise.
It really forces us to slow down, right? To examine what expertise actually looks like when you strip away the sheer speed of execution.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so let's unpack this, because our mission today is to explore exactly what happens to human expertise when AI takes over the heavy lifting.
We're going to look at how experienced professionals can transition from feeling, well, completely obsolete to realizing they're actually more essential than ever before.
Right. And it all starts with the story Margaret shares with Timothy right there by the fireplace, which really gets at the heart of this.
Yeah, so Margaret tells Timothy about a conversation she had earlier that day with a colleague of hers. And this colleague is a senior engineer with 20 years of experience.
20 years, that's a long time to build up a skill set.
Right, and he is genuinely excellent at his job. But he confesses to Margaret that he certainly feels, and this is his word, unnecessary.
And Margaret makes a very specific point to clarify his emotional state here. He isn't unhappy.
No,
He isn't storming around the office feeling directly threatened by the AI or fearing he's going to get fired tomorrow. It's much more existential than that.
exactly. The specific tasks he spent 2 decades becoming incredibly good at, the very things that earned him his senior title, are now things that this AI tool, Claude Code, can just do in a matter of minutes.
Yeah, he looks at his own painstakingly acquired skills, looks at the AI's output, and just doesn't know what is left for him to do.
That word unnecessary, I mean, it carries so much weight. It is a profound identity crisis.
Totally.
When you spend 20 years honing a craft, your sense of self-worth becomes totally linked to your ability to execute that craft better and faster than a novice.
Right, he isn't just losing tasks off his to-do list. He feels like he's losing the fundamental justification for his professional value.
I have to be honest, when I read that, I completely empathized with the guy. Isn't he right?
Well,
If a machine does the exact tasks you spent decades perfecting, aren't you essentially replaced?
it feels like being a master map maker watching the invention of GPS.
Oh, that's a good comparison.
Right. You might be the best cartographer in the world. You might know how to draw the topography perfectly by hand. But if a satellite maps the globe instantly and routes a driver in real time, your hand-drawn map is suddenly a beautiful museum piece.
A museum piece, yeah.
It isn't a functional tool anymore, so aren't you just obsolete?
What's fascinating here is how Margaret handles that exact sentiment. Because Timothy asks her the exact same question. Is he right?
And she doesn't just give a quick answer.
No, she takes a long time to answer. She doesn't dismiss the fear at all. She validates the reality of the shift, saying, he is right that his old role has changed. He is wrong that nothing is left.
He is wrong that nothing is left. That distinction is the entire hinge of this discussion, isn't it?
It really is. We have to separate the mechanics of the job from the purpose of the job. Margaret's colleague is confusing the act of typing code with the purpose of building software.
Okay, so to figure out why that 20-year veteran isn't just a museum piece, we have to strip down what seniority actually means
Right.
versus what the AI is actually doing.
Exactly. So Margaret asked Timothy to define the substance of seniority, not the job title, not the salary band, but the actual, substance of being a senior professional.
And Timothy gives a really thoughtful list. He says seniority is speed. It's pattern recognition-like. The ability to solve problems quickly because you've seen them a dozen times before. It's review. It's judgment.
And then he adds something a bit harder to name. Proportion.
Proportion.
Yeah, he defined proportion as a sense of what matters and what doesn't. Like what is actually worth the team's effort and what is just a distraction.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because Margaret then forces Timothy to map those human traits against what the AI Claude code actually does.
Right, laying them side by side.
Yeah, and when you do that, the friction becomes so obvious. Timothy realizes that the AI primarily replicates speed.
Oh, massively.
And it also heavily replicates pattern recognition, right? Serving up known solutions to known problems instantly. But the AI touches judgment and proportion the least.
Exactly. Margaret points out that her colleague has fundamentally misunderstood his own value. For 20 years, he thought his incredible typing speed and his ability to hold vast libraries of coding patterns in his head were the core of his seniority.
Because they were the most visible parts of his job.
Yes, they were the most visible, so he assumed they were the most valuable. But Margaret argues those mechanical skills were always just in service of something else. They were the vehicle, not the destination.
The speed was always in service of judgment, proportion, and understanding what the work is actually for.
Right.
Let me try an analogy here. Think of the AI as this incredibly powerful engine. It provides all this raw speed, torque, forward momentum. But human experience is the steering wheel.
I like that. An engine without a steering wheel.
Just gets you to the scene of the crash a whole lot faster.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, the AI only knows what you explicitly tell it to do. So isn't the real irreplaceable value of the senior developer knowing exactly what doesn't need to be said?
Yes. The source text explicitly highlights this invisible value. Margaret says the senior developer's deepest knowledge is almost entirely unsaid.
Because it's accumulated over years of observation and friction.
Right. Exactly. It lives in instinct. It lives in the memory of past failures. It's the understanding of how complex systems behave under pressure and, crucially, how the people using those systems behave over time.
Yeah, because the AI does not have the visceral memory of that time 3 years ago when, a simile architecture decision caused the whole system to crash on Black Friday.
Right. The AI doesn't know that the marketing department always changes its mind at the absolute last minute, so the code needs to be built with a very specific, unsaid flexibility to accommodate human indecision.
Think about your own workplace right now. Think about the unwritten rules, the historical context, the specific personalities you have to navigate just to get a project approved. No software tool possesses that context.
No, of course not. And because the AI is entirely blind to that unsaid context, human judgment suddenly stops being a nice bonus feature of your seniority.
Right.
It becomes the actual product. In the past, judgment was something you applied while you were typing. Now that the machine does the typing, the judgment is the main event.
It's not a consolation prize for losing the coding speed.
Exactly.
Which means the actual physical day-to-day reality of the job has to change. We have to move from the philosophy of seniority into practical application. The text describes this necessary evolution as a shift from being a builder to being a navigator.
Right. Margaret explains that the building phase, the execution, the implementation, typing out the known solutions, is something Claude Code is going to take over entirely.
Which sounds scary.
It does, but she emphasizes that this shift is not a threat. It is a returned capability. The machine handles the execution, which returns hours of time to the developer.
So the fundamental question of the modern workplace becomes how the professional spends that return time.
Yes, and the answer is that they become the connective tissue. Timothy notes that you use that return time upstream in the planning and framing of the problem before a single line of code is generated.
And Margaret adds that you also use it downstream, right, in the review and integration. The senior developer sits above the execution, judging whether what the AI built is actually right for the business, not just technically functional in a vacuum.
Right. The colleague with 20 years of experience was looking through the wrong end of the telescope. He was looking at what the AI could do and mathematically subtracting himself from the equation.
Comparing his typing speed to the machine's generation speed.
Exactly. But as a navigator, You aren't racing the machine. You are directing it.
But let's pause here and acknowledge how terrifying it is to let go of the building part. I mean, for a lot of experts, whether you write code, draft legal contracts, or design graphics, your identity is tied up in the tactile act of laying the bricks.
It's so true.
If you stop being the one writing the logic line by line, do you lose your connection to the work entirely? Like, do you become detached and just float away into pure abstraction?
That is the very real psychological fear holding a lot of professionals back right now. Letting go of the execution feels like losing your anchor. But Margaret argues that the navigator role actually requires a much deeper connection to the work than just laying bricks blindly. Claude Code can build a discrete piece of the puzzle flawlessly, but it cannot hold the whole.
Right. It can't hold the business context, the team dynamics, the history of the legacy systems, and the future strategic direction all at once in its mind.
No, only a human can do that.
Yeah.
To be a navigator, you have to ask the right questions before the building even begins. You have to understand the entire ecosystem, which demands more engagement, not less.
Okay, but if the senior developer isn't writing every line of code themselves anymore, they have to spend a significant portion of their time reviewing what the AI builds. And the source text points out that this introduces a massive psychological blind spot. Margaret calls it the authorship illusion.
Oh, this is such an important point. This might be the most critical warning in the entire narrative.
Yeah.
When a human developer writes code themselves, the very act of building it is inherently a form of review. You are forced to examine every microscopic decision as you type it out.
Because you're literally weaving it together in your own brain.
Exactly. You understand the logic intimately. But when you use an AI tool, you skip the weaving process. You simply prompt the tool, and you receive a fully formed output. The intimacy of creation is completely gone.
And the trap here is that the AI's output usually looks fantastic, right? It reads fluently, the syntax is clean, the style is consistent. It looks totally professional at first glance.
And Margaret warns that because it looks so fundamentally right, all those visual cues signal familiarity to the human brain.
Yeah.
Your natural critical review instinct immediately relaxes. You see clean formatting, and your brain just assumes the underlying logic must be sound.
It's like, think about the last time you proofread a beautifully formatted, professionally printed document, maybe like a glossy brochure or a finalized PDF.
Oh, yeah.
Your brain just skips right over the typos because the presentation looks so official. You assume it must be correct because it is presented with such absolute confidence.
It's so true.
Now imagine that glossy brochure is a critical piece of back-end software infrastructure. How do we actively fight that authorship illusion when the AI sounds so incredibly certain of itself?
Well, Margaret's solution requires a complete, deliberate mindset shift. She says you have to stop treating the AI's output the way you would treat your own initial drafts.
You can't look at it with that relaxed familiarity of authorship.
Right. Instead, you must treat it like the work of a capable but inexperienced colleague, someone you are explicitly and legally responsible for reviewing.
But wait, a capable human colleague can push back if you give them a bad instruction? They can say, are you sure you want to do it this way? That doesn't make sense. The AI doesn't push back. It just cheerfully and instantly complies, even if your premise is totally flawed.
Which is exactly why the authorship illusion is so dangerous, and why the review process must become drastically more rigorous.
Yeah.
The review is no longer just a mechanical checklist asking, do the automated tests pass? It has to elevate to asking, are we even testing the right things for this specific feature? It isn't just about whether the logic is technically correct in isolation. It is about whether that logic is appropriate for this specific system, for this specific team, at this exact moment in the product's life cycle.
So instead of relaxing because the machine did the heavy lifting, your review instinct actually has to sharpen to catch the subtle systemic errors that a machine cannot perceive.
Exactly. You have to be more awake, not less.
Now, this need for rigorous, sharpened oversight doesn't just apply to reviewing a single piece of code in a vacuum, right? The text zooms out and applies this philosophy to managing the entire team.
Yes.
We have to talk about the leadership dimension, especially when you think about junior developers who suddenly have these incredible AI superpowers at their fingertips.
Timothy brings this up as he thinks about his junior peers. In the past, a junior developer's impact was naturally limited by their own lack of experience.
They literally couldn't type fast enough.
Right. Or fully grasp complex system architecture well enough to build something massive very quickly.
Their lack of skill was basically a safety mechanism.
A natural governor on how fast things could go wrong. If a junior developer was going down the wrong path, it would take them weeks to build a flawed system, giving senior leadership plenty of time to catch the mistake and correct the course.
But Claude Code removes that natural governor entirely. Junior developers can now attempt highly complex architecture, and they can produce a massive amount of output in a single afternoon.
It's wild to think about.
Margaret delivers a line in the text that really stuck with me. She says, "Speed without direction was always dangerous. It is more dangerous now."
Such a great quote.
Think about that. You now have junior staff who can build thousands of lines of perfectly functional, cleanly formatted code that is completely wrong for the business problem at hand.
And it forces a real reckoning for leadership. Timothy reflects on how open and curious his junior peers are. With clear direction, that AI-powered curiosity will produce extraordinary, rapid results.
But without absolute clarity of direction from a senior leader.
Then that same curiosity just produces a massive pile of very quickly built wrong turns, which then have to be untangled.
So what does this all mean for the senior developer? Does this mean their entire job is reduced to acting as a highly paid babysitter for junior developers who are running around armed with high-speed AI tools?
No, it is the exact opposite of babysitting. The senior developer is the architect of the environment itself.
Okay, unpack that a bit.
Margaret tells Timothy that the AI tool is highly capable, but whether that capability is applied well or applied disastrously depends almost entirely on the environment it operates within.
And the environment is defined by the human leadership, the clarity of the project goals, the soundness of the underlying architecture, the communication culture of the team.
Exactly. No AI can generate those things. Only the senior developer can create that context. The AI has dramatically raised the stakes of the work.
Because a team can now build so much more volume and build it so much faster.
Right, so the question of whether they are building the right thing for the right reasons has never been more vital. The cost of a bad strategic decision is amplified by the speed of the execution.
So the sheer speed of the machine actually makes the slow, deliberate human judgment exponentially more valuable.
That's the paradox, right?
If you're driving a car at 10 miles an hour, a slight miscalculation on the map is no big deal. You can easily turn around.
Right.
But if the AI engine is pushing the car to 150 miles an hour, the person holding the steering wheel and reading the map is the only thing keeping the car from flying off a cliff.
That's exactly it. The technology forces the issue. You can no longer hide behind just being a fast typist or a reliable pattern matcher. The AI strips away the mechanical tasks and forces you to confront the actual strategic purpose of your expertise.
This brings us back to the fading light of that Victorian library. Timothy is gathering his coat, the fire has settled down to embers, and he has a moment of profound clarity.
He looks at Margaret and realizes he needs to think about his own career trajectory entirely differently.
Yeah, he says it's not just about what I build, but what I make possible.
And Margaret agrees. She points out that making things possible was always the senior developer's core mandate. The AI tool has simply made it impossible to avoid that responsibility anymore.
Behind them, Margaret goes back to her reading. She has completely taken inventory of the library's shelves, ensuring everything is in its proper, considered place.
It's a really quiet, satisfying conclusion that reinforces the enduring need for human oversight and careful curation, even in an age of instant generation.
If we bring this directly back to you listening right now, whether you are coding software, writing marketing copy, analyzing financial models, or managing a logistics team, the core takeaway from Aaron Rose's narrative is incredibly clear.
We have to fundamentally stop measuring yourself against the tool.
Yes. Stop comparing your personal execution speed to the machine's generation speed. It's a race you will always lose, and honestly, it's the wrong race to run.
Measure yourself against the work.
Start asking yourself, what does the work actually need to succeed in the real world? It needs context, it needs historical perspective, it needs alignment with human behavior, and it needs the unsaid knowledge that only you possess. The machine is the engine. You are the navigator.
Perfectly said.
But I want to leave you with one final, lingering thought to mull over on your own, building on the friction we just explored. We talked extensively about how that 20-year veteran built his invaluable judgment through the slow accumulation of instinct.
Right. He gained his profound understanding of proportion through the visceral memory of past failures.
Exactly. Through years of laying the bricks, making mistakes, and fixing them. So, if AI takes over all the execution and all the building from now on, and senior developers elevate to handle all the reviewing and navigating, How does the next T generation of junior developers ever build up that crucial memory of past failures needed to become senior navigators in the first place?
That is the million-dollar question. If they never lay the bricks, how do they learn to architect the building? That's the real puzzle we have to solve next.
Something to really think about the next time you watch an AI tool do your job in 5 minutes. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.